Time for the weekly update. Malcolm Hoenlein is with us, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM and the AM. And Moadim L'Simcha L'Gulash Le'ma Chag Sameach to you.
And Chag Sameach to you and everyone. And I hope people really take the time to celebrate and not take Yerushalayim or Israel for granted, especially at times like this when we realize the dangers that exist, the threats, and that the world still wants to prevent us from having Yerushalayim in the full expression of that. And I think, we too often sit back and marvel at the amazing changes that have taken place to see the city building at incredible rates. You can see dozens and dozens of cranes any day and in any section of Jerusalem that you go to, so that it's Ir Shachru B'Lo Yachtov. You see how the old and the new cities have come together, the developments in the city and the developments around the world still to deny us Jerusalem. So we should celebrate it, but also remember our achraya is our responsibility. Those of us who don't live in Israel and contribute every day, that especially today, to take stock of it and to talk to our kids about Yerushalayim.
Well said, and you always emphasize to speak to our children and grandchildren about it, and you also emphasize that every opportunity to speak to an elected official about Jerusalem is very important. And one thing I'll tell you, I was under the impression over the last couple of years that the missions to Washington had decreased, that there wasn't as much activity in that realm of going to advocate for Israel, to mention Jerusalem to our elected officials. But I've been proven wrong. It seems that there are more and more groups, at least from my vantage point, more and more groups that are sprouting up and that are taking an active role and spending at least a day in Washington or locally at their elected officials' district offices in order to transmit messages like these. And I know you always say, and you're right, that it's never enough, but I'm glad it's still out there, Malcolm.
We have to appreciate the efforts that are ongoing, and the NORPAC trip, other trips that take place that are of such great importance. And as you said, educating our local officials not to take them for granted. And then all of a sudden you find out that a DSA candidate sneaks in because we neglected it. They're not neglecting anything. They're running races all across the country, and they get foreign funding, and they get the backing of extremists in this country. The fact that they play on the indifference, the apathy, and the ignorance of young people in particular, but older people as well, who fall for simplistic messages. This is traditionally how the communists did it, how others have done it. The Nazis, when you give easy messages, you find people to scapegoat. The Jews are always the first target. We're never the last. And every society that failed to rise up and to put it down paid the price themselves for it. And that is happening around the world today. And unfortunately here at home as well. People become indifferent to it, to become inured, and we put Band-Aids on very serious wounds. People may not take so seriously Christoph's article in the New York Times, but you have to know around the world how many people can buy a story so ridiculous, so ludicrous, that Israel trained dogs to attack prisoners and sexually assault them, etc., knowing and putting it out the day of that the report came out on the truth of what happened in Gaza. Frankly, I can't read those stories. I read the first sentences or two, and I couldn't read it. It's so horrific. It's so, anybody who reads it and doesn't have a nightmare has to be a completely indifferent or a callous person. And yet the world's not reacting to it. The world doesn't pay. But Christoph's article, and you hear all of these left-wing shows on NPR, everybody makes references to the allegation that Israel trained dogs, and Israel's going to sue them now. But where are the demonstrations outside the New York Times? Where are the efforts? You can't boycott because there's very little left to boycott, but you certainly can make their lives miserable and be there as much as our enemies would be there and come to a neighborhood in Brooklyn or in Queens or anywhere to give expression to their extremism.
All right, lots of stuff to unpack based on where you drifted to. First of all, I'm happy to report to you that yesterday, at least the estimates that we were given, there were over 250 people in front of the New York Times protesting yesterday. So that I know it's not thousands, but it's certainly, a significant group for, a last-minute protest rally that was formed. So there are some people who are taking to the streets and making their voices heard in that way, and I know that that's encouraging, and I'm sure that that's a drop comforting. The other thing is that, and by the way, you also drifted into the Brooklyn episode, so let me just say, because and I'll tell you in a minute why I was trying so hard to stay positive today. Let me just say, when the NYPD is prepared, and I would argue even when they're not prepared, they're incredible. But not being prepared is obviously a major disadvantage. When they're prepared, they are incredible, the way they handle things like this. Now, you're local. You're right near where all this was going on in Brooklyn this week. Do you agree with me when it comes to NYPD?
First of all, absolutely. When their response, they were here in the hundreds. The demonstrators came within a half a block of my house. And when I drove home at night and it was late, I saw the remnants of it. I saw still the people marauding on the streets. Remember, they came by subway. The police had to be all along the routes. They had police in front of most of those institutions, schools and synagogues. They worked closely with the Flatbush Jewish Coalition, with the Shomrim, with the other groups that were there. But if you would see how this mass marched up and down the streets, and the hatred and the blood in the eyes that people told me, and they insulted obviously people and threatened people along the way. The question is, why are they allowed to march and wantonly? There are laws, by the way, that as long as you keep moving, they can do it. If they stand still, then the demonstration takes on a different legal status. So that I think that, but the fact is that they can turn out these people, whether they're paid, which I believe many are, and many could not tell you what they were demonstrating for. And if you look at the people and those who got questioned on the sidelines and who would answer, you get the same dumb answers every time. And I want to congratulate those who did go to the New York Times, absolutely, and Impact, which has done a couple demonstrations in Queens on Sunday. It wasn't a huge turnout, but it got immense press coverage, and so it's an opportunity to tell people. And the more we do it, to learn from Soviet Jewry, it's the grassroots. It's not always the big numbers; it's the presence.
Right.
And they do that also. They're present at every one of our events, and a few people, because the press always has to be, quote, even-handed, especially if it's a Jewish pro-Israel event, they have to be even-handed with the other side.
I don't even know if people realize that the pro-Palestinians are in front of the New York Times almost on a daily basis.
Yes, and we are taking too many things for granted. A very respected person who happens to be right now in Jerusalem sent me a message this morning about picketing it or boycotting it. There's not that much to boycott. It's a different era now, especially because everything is online.
Right.
But the name and shame does matter, and the presence. And continuing to see how this mayor and the revelations about his wife, even sometimes more astounding, but he is as well. He encourages this. He can say what he wants, but every time he talks about it and attacks the purpose of the rally. I don't see him attacking anything from any other group when the pro-Chinese government events take place. I've never heard him say attack those events or many of the other horrific things that go on, the pro-terrorism, pro-Islamist events, and yet he's not heard. And, having a Shavuos party is not an antidote to it. We can't allow people to keep doing this to us, giving the appearance that in fact we accept it, we live with it. He's the mayor. I don't say people should certainly physical assaults and public criticism in responsible ways, and also not to keep building him up, but I hope that people retain Jewish dignity, Jewish presence at the appropriate times, and not give the cover and to say what great things are happening when we know, in fact, that's not the case.
So when he condemns the symbolically anti-Semitic flag flying over the NYU area, downtown Manhattan, you don't give that much credence, doesn't it?
Well, let's ask the question, why does somebody think that they can do that? Do you think that 5 years ago somebody would have thought to put up a swastika on NYU's building? No, they wouldn't have done it, but because of the permissive attitude, because they believe that the consequences will be limited, and because of the indoctrination and extremism, and I would tell you I still think the vast majority of students are not impacted, that we have to continue our efforts to counter it. But we know that, the president is in China today. I hope that they raise the issues of the fact that China is pouring billions and billions of dollars onto our campuses and to undermine America from inside. And I don't mean just buying property and doing other things which pose national security risks, but that they, through Roy Singham in Hong Kong, have transferred huge amounts of money and continue to do so, and to support these kind of efforts. It's not in China's interest in the long run. So and the foreign money that came from Qatar in the tens of billions of dollars, and they're continuing to do it. The administration deserves credit for taking steps against it, for trying to identify and root it out. But the universities still haven't come clean about how much money they get. They still don't really tell the truth to the public about the influence of these institutions. And you see that this sense of permissiveness, the president of NYU has been very outspoken and is very committed personally. But the very idea that a student can think they can get away with that. Now, it could be an outsider who did it, and I hope that they will do something to find out. But the very idea that they think they can get away with it in New York tells you what the situation is.
You are on fire today, Mr. Hoenlein.
I think there's plenty of reason to be on fire, given the confluence of issues.
Did you not sleep last night? Did you make it through the entire night and just show up at JM&M? Is that what happened?
I don't sleep most nights, so it wouldn't be a big difference.
Did you catch 40 winks last evening or not?
Maybe 36. Double high, I go for you.
And here's why I'm so upset, frankly. The whole week, obviously, we had to make a decision, and you and I made the right decision. Weekly update today, even though the Yerushalayim special obviously takes priority. And I was really, I thought we could, try to keep this conversation so positive, so hopeful. And I know that there are some positive and hopeful things, obviously. But then this article comes out. And I say to myself, and I said it to the listeners early this morning, woe is me. We're going to be talking about this blood libel article the entire morning. And for good reason, of course. But it is very, very upsetting. And I think it was Nachum Segal who made the point. Shouldn't something like this, especially with the reputable New York Times behind it, shouldn't this be an investigative journalistic piece and not show up in the opinion section of the paper?
That's true, but it shouldn't even appear in the investigative piece unless they were really going to do an investigation and give both sides and not accept the ludicrous charges that, I didn't see anything in the New York Times writing up the very positive economic predictions and ratings that Israel got in the last 10 days or so. I mean, just across the board, at a time if Israel's been at war as much as it is, that the growth rate of their economy is predicted to be more than double what in the United States is, that it still remains the 11th happiest country, that, its ratings, our economic ratings are just remarkable.
Well, what's the U.S. economic ratings? I mean, it's unbelievable. The Israeli economy right now has to be, and obviously is, we know what's happening with the shekel and dollar, has to be so much stronger than even the United States of America. It's amazing.
It definitely, if it's because of the weakness of the dollar and the strength of the relative strength of the shekel. But we also have to think of the consequences of that, of all the institutions who get dollars from America contributions. The value is down 20%.
No, I get it, but I wonder if the New York Times.
No, I meant for you. This is for the listeners to understand that we have to up our contributions.
Understood. But I wonder if the New York Times, hesitates to laud Israel for it when we see what's happening in this country.
not because of what's happening here. They will not laud Israel for anything virtually that is taking place. Through all of this period, I'm getting calls every day from Israeli companies and stuff who have new medical breakthroughs, who are working on all sorts of critical diseases and afflictions and amazing stuff that's going on in AI in Israel. And yet, the only thing that you would see from the New York Times and from so much of the talk radio is actually been very positive in general. But NPR, and you can cite the BBC reports. I mean, they will find any story. They will go back to the family in Lebanon 22 times and spend 15 minutes of an hour broadcast, just detailing how terrible it is without saying who's really responsible. Did Israel want to be there? No, Israel wanted to live in peace. They had peace with Lebanon. They would have peace with Lebanon. The talks actually in Washington yesterday went well, and they're supposed to reconvene today again. And the people of Lebanon, you see the interviews, when they're honest, they're blaming Hezbollah. They're angry that Israel had a bomb. They don't like it. But many of them want to have peace, or at least a peaceful relationship with Israel.
Yeah. Something we don't get from the mainstream media. That picture is not painted that way. It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio. Around the world, the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and, of course, in the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein with us on this Yom Yerushalayim, Moadim L'Simcha L'Gula Shlema Chag Sameach to all, 59th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem. But you know what really depressed me, and you're gonna think I'm nuts, that this is what to me was the most depressing part of this whole article from Christoph. You always, in a situation like this, when you're making these types of accusations and you're taking a few people and taking whatever they say for granted and printing it as if they're 100% accurate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You always need some insider, in this case, some prominent inside Israeli, to confirm your findings. And you know who it was this time around? You know who he quotes? You ready for this?
Yes, go right ahead.
Ehud Olmert. You could depend on Ehud Olmert to be quoted in an article like this, that, this stuff happens and none of it surprises me.
Yeah, but you didn't say the other side. Olmert denied that he said it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He said he wrote a letter to the Times.
I didn't know that.
And Olmert, with whom I've had massive disagreements, we used to work very closely when he was mayor of Jerusalem. He was very supportive, and he tended, as you know, and trended extreme left more and more. But he wrote and said, you distorted my words deliberately and took them on over it.
Was that printed in the Times?
Yeah, right.
So the letter wasn't printed?
I don't read the Times, so I can't tell you if it was printed, but I doubt very much it was printed. But I do know that he sent the letter.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. You always need that guy. I thought he was that guy, but now I got to take back what I said, I guess.
No, you're right in the principle that they always look for somebody, and we'll get them to say, everybody thinks they can outsmart reporters. And I tell them, they will take out of what you say whatever suits their purpose, not necessarily the truth.
100%. And then, of course, the dog accusations. I mean, those who are familiar with the lives of dogs, they're laughing at these things. And he's quoting them as if these stories are 100% accurate.
It just shows you, there's no limit to what people are willing to accept, both out of ignorance, but mostly out of prejudice. But they accept all sorts of things about the United States, too, and about leaders. And again, it's domestic extremists, it's foreign funds and extremists who want to undermine America. And everybody will pay the price. It's not Jews are maybe the first victims. We're never the last.
Right.
And to understand, when you look at those young people and the people who came to this demonstration, you didn't see sophisticated people, and if they were interviewed, that they would make a legitimate case for what they don't even know what was going on inside that room to do it. And maybe, there are a lot of details about how it came about, when it came about. But if you would ask them questions about it, they could not answer it. And they are being manipulated, and perhaps, as I said, compensated and organized to do it. I know that in Washington at the rally, I asked some of the people who came to protest, and they told me that they told us to go on this bus and come here, but they had very little real knowledge of what was the purpose. They knew it was against Jews, against Israel, but didn't care. And they did violative things. Remember what they did to statues and set fires and stuff. Yep. And the consequences are still too limited when they downgrade the charges and don't hold them fully to account. Of course, the message is that we are going to allow this.
And the last thing on this, but you have to admit it, it's not hard to believe, no matter where you are in this globe, it's not hard to believe stories of abuse among the incarcerated. It's not difficult to believe that.
Of course.
But
definitely true.
if he would have just, and not that I'm giving him advice about how to handle the PR on this, but if he would have handled, excuse me, if he would have handled this as a normal, abuse among the incarcerated story, it would have been a lot, even more effective and believable. Again, I'm not saying any of it's true, but you get my point. Than exaggerating and going to the point where they're making up stories that aren't even, possible to happen. So it's amazing that, that they're so convinced that the audience is going to eat this up that they could say whatever they want.
And it's the shock value. They know it would get very little attention otherwise. Right. So you need the shock value to get people to, and the more they talk about it, the more these guys like it. I mean, Chris Number has won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. This is not just some ragtag reporter.
By the way, I could see him getting an award for this. He exposed something that they all denied, and I'm telling you, I could see it. Anyway, on to other stuff. So you think that the President of the United States had any influence on China regarding Iran? I know that when it comes to exports and purchases, a business relationship with Iran, we're always questioning that in terms of China. Then, of course, where China is in terms of, whose side they're on in the Iranian quest to take over as much as possible in the Middle East. Did he make any headway on this week?
We don't know because much of the discussion, of course, remains secret. China has one priority, and that's China, and they do whatever they can to protect their energy, to protect their economy. They are looking to play a much bigger global road, and that's why the Belt and Road Initiative, which they do, and they do much of it quietly. But the infiltration in the United States, buying the farmland, their activities on the campuses, and people always say to me, well, why would they do it? Why do they care? Why would they want to promote anti-Semitism? The answer is because, number one, Jews are seen identified with the United States, with the West, and certainly with Israel identifying with them. Second, that they look at where they can play a role. How do they exploit it for their benefit to be able to have a role in the Middle East? Most countries and leaders I speak to in the region, they're afraid of China's involvement. They know that number one, it's getting energy out of every country, but they also go in and they buy huge amounts of land. They did in Africa, and they take out all the food. They don't leave anything there. It's like scorched earth. And African leaders would complain all the time because they would buy, huge swaths of land. And because they have a population to feed, and they have real demographic imbalances in the Chinese population, children, their economy is buoyed by the fact they got rare earth materials and other things. But I think the only answer is to be tough, and I hope that President Trump is doing that in the quiet meetings that they have and putting the markers down. I mean, they have multiple agendas. He brought all these business guys to show the opportunities that are there. We always find out afterwards with him, and they will put a good front on it. But the question is, did he put down the markers and say that they have to come out? They're obviously on the side of Iran, have been supplying Iran during the war, continued to try to send cargo boats and even replenishing some military equipment. If they can neutralize that, that will be an achievement as well. China is an important player, and we have, unfortunately, limited ability to open another theater. So they want to keep the Southeast Asia more quiet, but there has to be a clear message. And, President is known as a great negotiator. we'll see when we find out what the real story was, not just what the public perception.
So a week ago, I asked you if the war is over. Well, we asked the same question again today. Are we any closer one way or the other?
No, we Iran and the information that keeps coming out, and it's coming from U.S. official assessments, although they can be manipulated as well, because there are people there with prejudices too, and it often comes out. But the fact that they retain perhaps 70% of their missile capacity, a huge part of their drone capacity, that the underground facilities were not penetrated in many places, and that they have even their own, they develop special rubble clearing equipment, bulldozers, so they rapidly reopened a lot of these facilities, and they obviously suffered great damage and to the economy, to some of their military capacity. The Air Force was destroyed, the Navy suffered greatly, but unfortunately they retain a lot of the missile capacity, and they retain the enriched uranium. They talk about, the dust that the president talks about. If you don't remove it, that will be, and if we don't clearly set back the nuclear program, meaning that if they want to develop isotopes for medicine, they can import them, or there can be, you enrich to 3 to 5%. They're enriching still to weapons grade, to virtual weapons grade, and we have to see whether the fighting will resume, which I think is a serious prospect. Wow. And the CENTCOM has said they need 2 weeks to degrade additional facilities. And remember, we did not strike a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the places that would hurt them further and build up more internal pressure. And a lot of people always ask why there aren't more demonstrations. First of all, you don't know about the demonstrations in Iran because nobody's reporting them if they take place. But, the events in January have intimidated people, and I don't think that they see a light at the end of the tunnel right now. But revolts don't take place during the war. It happens afterwards. So people shouldn't be despondent, and I think that the popular unrest against this regime remains strong. But you have to say that even degrading 2, 3, 4 levels of the leadership that they've been able to sustain, and the IRGC stepped in, and frankly, they are very extreme.
I know you hate predictions, but if I pressed you on whether it's going to start up again in May or June, you would probably say yes.
I would say that it's a serious concern. I think if you look at the actions of the other neighbors in the region who have been hit, UAE has been hit a lot, and it's proven, even despite the dispute about whether Prime Minister Netanyahu did visit there, as he said, or didn't, as they said. The fact is that they lifted the restrictions on U.S. overflights. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait did as well. The UAE did never impose them. And I hope that we will see that relationship between Israel and the UAE grow further after this is over, because they came to see who their real ally is, and they are dropping out of a lot of the regional groupings. They dropped out of the OPEC Plus, but I believe they'll also drop out of the Gulf Cooperation Council, many other things, hopefully. And also that we know that U.S. bases got hit worse than was reported in Qatar and Kuwait and UAE, and we lost planes and other equipment, but relatively speaking, the U.S. troops have remained safe, thank God, and operating off the ships. But the Straits of Hormuz, if we don't find a solution, if they can walk out the day after in control, both domestically and in the Straits, then it becomes such a propaganda victory. It covers over the tremendous losses that they have suffered.
Folks, we're going to get to the sounds of 1967 by the late, great Mayor Weingarten. He narrates the whole segment. We'll do it right after Rabbi Yudin's presentation. Malcolm, what you were referring to was that Israel says the prime minister made a secret trip to the UAE. The UAE says he didn't. You have no insight into which one is true or which side is right, do you?
Maybe they're both right. I don't know. But
I say this every time, and you're going to call me an old guy, an old-fashioned guy for saying it. I say it every time, and I don't get it. The prime minister knows what type of public statement like this would generate. He knows the reaction it would generate. Of course the UAE is going to deny it, and it's going to become a story in the news. Why can't everyone just be quiet? Why, even if there is a secret visit, can't it stay a secret?
I think it's one of the key questions one I ask all the time, and not only about releasing secrets, and it's something Arab leaders raise, that nothing long-term remains secret, but it's the price of a democracy, a rampant democracy in the case of Israel, that people, feel the need or make statements. And I'm sure there had to be a reason why at that moment he revealed it, and I'm worried that the election will raise the domestic political aspects, and people will play to that when everything is so sensitive and it's so important that we keep the focus and any attention that is given to this debate and taking it away from the pay to slay continuing by the Palestinians, the tunnels, to tell the story of the tunnels that are being uncovered still in Gaza, but also in Lebanon. Immense ones, 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, with sleeping facilities, with all sorts of things. Hamas training, in Turkey and Turkey's role in all of this, the challenges that about the Iraqi base that Israel had. Why did that have to become a public story now?
Right.
And you can ask about an awful lot of subjects, and when important things are not getting the coverage that they deserve. You know that Israel, it came out, is supplying 4 times the amount of food that is needed in Gaza. I didn't see anybody writing all of that up. And so, and that Hamas then steals it again, takes the excess, but now it's harder for them to sell because the people are getting so much food that they're now talking about cutting back the food because it goes to waste, and it only benefits the Hamas and Hamas's reassertion of itself. I think that the revelations about the PA education and how this generation is being trained with the same hatred, and they admit, despite all their promises, that they didn't change any of their textbooks. UAE did, others did, they did not. And it just tells me that that we are not careful how we speak, and that includes our community. And I just want to target again people who go on public media and attack other Jews. Better think twice and 3 times before doing it, because you have to think of the audience and the public. There may be legitimate criticism and often factually they're wrong about what percentage voted for Mamdani, and I hear really well-intentioned people, very active, say, the second biggest problem we have is the Jews. You got to think of the audience picks this up. And those of you who know these people and hear it, make sure you tell them, and it's got to stop. You have major personalities in the media who are Jewish, who are saying these things, and don't think of the consequences. And how many times we tell them, it's the grandstanding of this, that it's so destructive for our community and long-term damage that's being done.
100%. Well, great message. Wishing you a Chag Sameach, Moadim L'Simcha L'Gula Shlema. As you always say, no matter what people might think or advise or even hesitate to open up their mouth about things going on in Israel. After all, we're not living there. The future of Israel, negotiations, how it should treat its neighbors militarily, etc., etc., etc. Right? We could debate from today till tomorrow if any of us have a right to say anything. You always remind us, when it comes to Jerusalem, it belongs to every Jew around the entire world.
One word on that, if I can, and that is that people take the time today to read up about the amazing discoveries, the pilgrim rooms, all the things that have been discovered in the last year, reconfirming the Tanakh, reconfirming everything in our Masorah and in our tradition, and amazing stuff literally every single day. So tonight, Friday night, speak to your kids about it. Believe me, they know nothing about these discoveries. And frankly, you don't know anything about them. So take the time, go and read some of the stories. Look what's happening in Ir David. Look what's happening at the tunnels. The amazing discoveries that are going on, and the every single one of them confirms Tanakh. And if your kids have doubts, This is the answer. You can show them. You can show them the bedrock in the mountains. You show them a mikveh hewn into the rock that is exactly like the mikvahs that we use today, right near the kotel, right near that people obviously went to before they went up to the base of Mikdash. But the new discovery, where you can go from Mei Shiloh, walk all the way up under the old city, you come up in near the kotel. It's amazing. Can you think what your grandparents would have done to see one of those things? And we take it for granted. It frustrates me so much that you don't tell these positive stories to reinforce the message. You want to talk about a real estate fair? That's the real estate.
Ooh.
It's our claim to Yerushalayim, and it's just so amazing. And the sacrifices that so many people make working day to day there. And we should at least celebrate it so our kids can understand why this is their Yerusha as well.
Phenomenal. Chag Sameach, and I thank you. Have a wonderful Shabbos. And a wonderful Chag Shavuot Sameach. And we'll speak, please God, in 2 weeks.
Take care of the Shabbos.
Malcolm Hoenlein weekly update. Excuse me, on this Yom Yerushalayim here at JM in the AM. Well,